Today is our last webinar of April. We've been doing a series for Sexual Assault Awareness Month this month, hosted by us, Freely Hope. My name is Nicole. I'm the International Director of Freely Hope. We exist to end sexual violence. And today on our webinar, we have my very good friend, Rebecca Crook, who is the Executive Director of Metis. Metis accelerates the pace of education reform across Africa by investing in African leaders and their capacity to drive high quality education initiatives. And she'll be sharing more about that work that she's doing in Nairobi. So I wanted to tell the brief story of how we met because it's quite fascinating. Now, when we're walking around together, people think that we're twins. Can you see the resemblance? The short hair, yeah. And if we do our hair a certain way, like there's a way where we really look alike. So we actually met on Instagram, of all places. Rebecca is a really renowned Instagram personality. I don't know what to call you, but influencer or something. She's an excellent photographer and has curated just beautiful stories and photographs on Instagram, and somehow found me, and we connected over our shared passion for ending sexual violence and work that was based in Nairobi at the time. And since then,
I've been in her DMs. Let's just put it that way.
that she did, and it was very awkward because she reaches out, slid into the DMs, and she wanted to meet up, and the only way we could meet up was one day before I was leaving out of country and she was coming into the Bay Area. So I picked her up from the airport as a complete stranger. I've never done that in my entire life. And that's where the friendship blossomed, I suppose.
Went on a good long hike and ate dim sum afterwards.
We did. So that's how we connected a couple years ago, and since then our work and our leadership and our friendship has just evolved since then. And so today's conversation, I just really wanted to kind of dig into the personal aspect of leadership. As we've been able to learn from each other on so many aspects, I thought that her wisdom and her perspective would be so important to share with all of you today. So Rebecca, go ahead and introduce yourself and share how your work has led you up to this point of working with Metis.
Yeah, sure. Hi everyone, I'm Rebecca. I got into this work really because I believe that every kid deserves a joyful and relevant and life-affirming education. And I think most of us don't get to access that. So I wanted my small offering in the world to be a part of making that a reality. And when I looked back at my own life, I was really fortunate to attend a free public school that was revered as high quality, but it wasn't life affirming. It wasn't a place where I could go and be my whole self. And even though I got my straight A's, I was still really suffering inside. I was raped when I was in high school, and I didn't tell anyone for years. And so to me, school was a place you would go and you'd be fake. And it was in a lot of ways, it was really rote, the same sort of stuff that I see here in a completely different context here in Kenya. But yeah, I knew that I wanted to support all kids to have a great education that really equips them to make their world and our world a better place. So that led me to the classroom. I was a bilingual kindergarten teacher in Richmond, California, which is actually where Nicole lives, which is wild. She splits her time between there and here. So I was a bilingual teacher there, was always really keen to live outside of the United States. I feel like it's impoverished in a lot of ways. And so I was really fortunate to relocate to Johannesburg, South Africa, to support a network of low-fee private schools called Spark, and served as a principal there, and made my way to Nairobi in 2016 to support principals and to support teacher leadership in informal settlements here. And I think Kenya is just at such an interesting inflection point in terms of its education reform process. And yeah, really wanted to be a part of galvanizing a collective of local leaders to be at the forefront of that and really access the knowledge, tools, and resources they need to grow their impact. And so birthed Metis in 2017, and our core program is a fellowship for education leaders who are leading nonprofits, for-profits, or in the government. And we support them to start and scale path-changing initiatives in learning and teaching.
And one of the really cool projects that you're doing in Nairobi is developing this curriculum and learning guide for students who are studying from home and need access to more academic resources during this time. And I remember when you told me you were doing this idea, I was like, how are you creating a curriculum in the midst of all of this? Because there's just so much happening in our worlds, in our countries, and our communities are really suffering. How are you able to create that? And you said that that you thrive in crisis. And so I thought that was really interesting, how like crisis and trauma can actually cause us to thrive and be even more creative. And I think that some of the ways that I have also learned in this process too, where the effects of COVID-19 in terms of the trauma that it's causing on our community is not new. Yes, COVID-19 is new, but the trauma that it's creating is not new. And therefore, in that, we're able to learn from past experiences and use that as a way to propel us forward. And so for you, in this notion of like thriving in crisis, how has your own survivor story and life experiences shaped your perspective as a leader?
That's so interesting. I really honestly did not even occur to me to connect my experience as a survivor of sexual violence with my leadership journey. My mom always said, Rebecca, I think you really thrive in chaos, which I do think is true. But yeah, now that you say that, and I think you would know this best in getting to work with some of your staff members and your community members here in Nairobi. I think we all get to, in this unprecedented time, have the opportunity to dig deep in our own reserves of resilience. Of course, none of us ever have experienced something quite like a global pandemic before, but I think we've all faced challenges, things that were new and scary and traumatizing to us, and we're still here. So I think, yeah, for me, it is tapping into that reserve, and I see that, so clearly with your work with Freely and Hope as well.
Yeah, and I think that's what I love about my job, is I get to connect with people who have such beautiful stories like yourself, like the communities that we serve, that's what teaches me how to thrive and how to be creative and how to move forward and how to innovate, which is the basis of our conversation today. So in talking about like, how do we innovate in times of global crisis and pandemic and trauma, what would you say are the core components of innovation, and how are you applying these innovations to your work?
Yeah. Well, you asked earlier, like, how are you creating these home learning guides? I think that was not in the plan. That was not in the strategic plan for Metis for this year, right? But I think that, in our curriculum, at least, that E and Metis is empathize. So we go through a design thinking process, and it really teaches us just to listen, pay attention. What are the needs? And then you pivot based on that. And you don't have to do so alone, right? I think that, I can never do this all by myself, but I think that's the beauty of our community. So to date, Metis has supported 46 education leaders, both in their individual, folks are launching schools, they're launching ed tech, they're starting after school programs, but collectively, they're always learning and supporting each other through a community. And so it's that community. We were, thinking, gosh, well, we had our first approach was to ensure that all fellows had the accurate information to pass on to their students, teachers, and teams, and then to be able to pivot really quickly to distance learning. And then when we did that, we realized, okay, we can share all these lessons in a digital resource hub. And so we can create a repository that other educators and parents can use. And you know what, we can actually host webinars for parents, because collectively that's an issue. So why don't we partner with a parent organization locally here called Mums Village to host webinars? And then we got to thinking, gosh, well, you know, what else can we do? Most kids here do not have the luxury of internet. And so how are they going to access their right to education? So we thought, well, you know, we tried to work with a bunch of different publishing companies to get books out. We were not trying to reinvent the wheel here, especially not in a crisis. So when we hit a wall with that, you know, and this is all in a couple of days, we thought, okay, well, you know, we're a collective. We can pool our knowledge, and from early childhood to secondary, we can put together, you know, a potential daily schedule and activities, student-centered activities that parents and learners can do together at home. And so it really just came from what's the need and what do we have? You know, I think that there's, you know, when each of our communities have such immense, or so rich in resources. So it's how do we really leverage that collectively? And so that's really how it all happened. And then I put up, we did a flash fundraiser to fund the printing of 15,000 home learning guides. And then have worked with other organizations to distribute them. Again, we're just not, we need to work within existing systems. So if folks were distributing much needed food or protective gear, we thought, okay, and in addition to just, you know, why, instead of just giving someone maize meal, why don't we also give them a resource to learn at the same time? So we're just kind of layering and you know, we're going to talk about this later of what we've learned in our leadership journeys, but it's really pushed me to be more collaborative. And now, you know, actually the next step is that we're going to work with another ed organization called a ReFu to adapt that paper-based home learning guide and take it to SMS so that even more kids can access. SMS is text message. I don't know if you guys use that in America, but
Is that term?
yeah, so it's really, I mean, it's evolving really quickly, Nicole, and I think it's just continuing to listen, pay attention to the needs, and then work with what you got to answer the call of the moment, really.
Yeah, when you're saying like listening to the community and recognizing what resources are available there, I think for us it's similar in that we've always wanted to create more content and opportunities for survivors to share their stories, for survivors to share their voices, and also for as an organization and its partners to discuss the things that we've learned as best practices in ending sexual violence and uplifting the voices of survivors. And so with that, that's kind of why we started these weekly webinars, because we wanted to have all these conversations with people that all care about building a violence-free world and promoting it, putting it out there, and having opportunities for our global community to engage in important conversations like this. So the webinar is one thing that we've done. Another thing that we've been working on for a really long time, and now is like what's forcing us to finish it, is a new website, which I'm super excited to launch in a few weeks. That will be content driven from survivors and also from our staff and our partners on best practices to ending sexual violence, leadership lessons of things that we've learned along the way, risks that we've taken, mistakes that we've made, and how we've rebounded from that. And also stories of the sheer resilience of survivors, where those stories could ideally help others who are out there who also want to share their story and use it in a way that can empower themselves and empower their communities. So I feel like, you know, in looking at how we are recognizing the gifts of our community and trying to leverage that in the best way, I feel like that is innovation as well, because otherwise we might just be so keen on following the strategic plan, as you mentioned before, that you're neglecting what's right in front of you. So I think some of the things that I've been trying to recognize too is just being present to the moment and to what this pandemic is calling us to do, as opposed to what we've planned for initially. So you
Yeah.
alluded to the next portion already of how has our leadership changed and how are we better for those changes? Where would you like to begin there?
Like, I'm just like, oh, I don't know if I'm like better yet. I feel like if you were to like, you know, yeah, growth sometimes feels like death. And, you know, I always use that metaphor of like, yeah, you're like caterpillars in a chrysalis, it just, there might be transformation that's happening, but it looks like pretty disgusting and dead in there. So, I mean, I think I feel challenged to, um, you know, sticking to a plan that's got to die in some way. Like rugged individualism, like that has to die in this moment. Um, the pace at which, I mean, I feel like we actually are evolving quite quickly, and I feel like really intentionally work, but the pace and our commitment to a really capitalist crazy way of being, and that's got to die. So I mean, I think both at the macro level and at the micro level, I'm feeling like there's a lot of death that has to happen in my own leadership and our own kind of way of being at Metis and in the world. So that's how I'd answer that. But I know I mean, tell me, how would you answer that question for you? I'm so inspired by what you were sharing earlier.
Oh
Can
my
you
God,
share with
yeah.
everyone?
Lots of things. I want to remind people to, if you have any other questions, to put it in the Q&A chat, and we'll get to that in a second. I see some coming through already, so keep the questions coming. Yeah, I think death is a very strong word, but you're right in that there is a lot of sense of loss of what we thought we were going to do and what we thought was the right pathway to take and what we thought were our big grandiose plans for 2020. And so in that there is grief, but in that grief, it's also calling us to, like you're saying, it's like connect and to collaborate and to recognize that we can't do it alone, that individualism that you talked about. And I think for me, like one of the things I've recognized is like, yeah, I cannot fight a pandemic by myself, let alone within my organization. And so my leadership team in Kenya and in Zambia, we've just been collaborating a lot more than we have before to share best practices amongst the three countries to figure out, okay, this is what's working in the US, this is what's working in Zambia. How can we adapt those changes and make it work for our own context and learn from each other in that? And the other thing is too that we're all experiencing this differently. The majority of my staff are survivors, and so their sense of resilience is, I would say, very strong. But at the same time, it's also pulling a lot of trigger points for them. And so for like me, who's not a survivor and haven't gone through the same trauma as they have, what am I being, or what am I doing, or how am I creating a safe environment for them to still thrive, to still rest, to still innovate, to still be creative, and to also recognize that right now we can't do a lot of things that we wanted to do, and that's actually okay. Like, we don't have to follow the strategic plan. It'll just be pushed back. It's okay. And having grace for both myself and for my leadership team amidst all of that. I think the other thing as well is, as I've been talking with my global leadership team in Kenya and Zambia, we've initiated daily calls, and that practice has been really, that regularity has been really important for all of us to connect every single day and be like, okay, what were the successes of today? What were the challenges of today? And tackle those challenges together and celebrate the successes together. And also check in with each other to see how we're really doing. I found that when we're doing these check-ins, the same struggles that they have are the exact same struggles that I have. And if I'm not doing my work, then I can't be as available as I would like to be to them. And so it's this simultaneous learning among countries and cultures and perspectives on how we can all navigate this together so that we can be healthy and happy and achieve our big dreams. And so listening to each other's wisdom during this time has really changed me and challenging me to be more vulnerable and to be more okay with the letting go, or the death, as you alluded to before. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel that. I love that. I appreciate that in you so much. I also think like you just share, while there is we mentioned the losses, but also what's being birthed in this time and what you have birthed and what Freely and Hope is birthing is really cool. Even if it seems small, just that we're going to have more frequent global check-ins, and we're going to listen to each other, and we're going to, and how we're really doing. Um, I think that, what is it, like, necessity is the mother of innovation. And you've had to, you can't, we're meant to be in Kenya right now. And
Right.
so now coming up with other ways, and it's potentially for the better. We've definitely seen that in our own community too.
Yeah, I'm curious to know for yourself, like what leadership practices have helped to sustain you in your leadership as you're managing so many fellows across the different spectrums and they're in the community struggling with the things that they see. What's sustaining you during this time?
Them, totally them. I mean, I I think that, we are a collective. We're in the midst of a fellowship right now, um, where we meet, monthly, and it's meant to be in person, and we have a full day training. So all of that we've had to kind of shift, and they've been, you know, coming up with different ideas for how to do that and how to really meaningfully connect over Zoom and how to do guest speakers. So they're coming up with all sorts of ideas, and that makes, I think, our programming stronger and more responsive. But it's not just, we've done these home learning guides, and we're going to launch this SMS program, and that's a collective effort. But in their own spheres, whether they're in with the IGA, which is a fairly high income area here in Nairobi, or whether in their Mathare, which is a low income area here, everyone has had to pivot. And the passion with which educators are doing that, some of our leaders didn't know how to use Google Classroom or Zoom, before March 13th, which was the day the first COVID case was confirmed here in Kenya. And they have figured out, how to launch meaningful distance learning for their schools. Other people have started direct cash transfers and are figuring out ways to do that in safe ways, and ways that stimulate the local economy. Other people are doing food distribution. People are doing home visits. There's one of our fellows is working on distance coaching for teachers via WhatsApp. So, people are really, I think I've seen in our community, really just using this opportunity to really reimagine education. I think I'm so inspired by that creativity. I personally think that our education systems were not serving the many, they were serving the few, and before any pandemic. And I think this is a real opportunity to pause and deeply, deeply reimagine what it looks like, to ensure that every kid is in a learning environment that's supporting them to thrive.
Yeah, I'm just reading through the chat window, and some things that are being reiterated is the importance of seeing the need, tapping into the networks and accessing what we already have. And then Caroline is sharing a quote from Cynthia Ocelli about the whole caterpillar transforming into the butterfly and like that mess in between. The quote says, "For a seed to achieve its greatest expression, it must come completely undone. The shell cracks, its insides come out, and everything changes. To someone who doesn't understand growth, it would look like a complete destruction."
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And then, then the plant, out of that, the plant grows.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks for sharing that, Caroline.
Yeah, and I feel like that's what we've been able to see in our communities. Like you just shared all of those things that your fellows are doing. Like that is the blossoming of their work, that is transforming their communities in this moment. And what I'm seeing too is like what we've started doing, which we've never done before because we're not a disaster relief organization. We've been having to provide food for our families because access to food is sometimes the barrier for a lot of our girls being at home, where they're pressured to find work as the sole breadwinner of their family, where they're pressured to go back to the streets, which increases sexual violence. And so as an organization, if our mission is to end sexual violence and food is the barrier to that, then in this time we've had to realize that we need to pivot and provide the food. And what we're seeing is,
right, you have to let go of your own ego and saying, oh, that's like,
we
I
don't
don't know, and that's below me, that's not what we do, that's not so I think, right, and that's a core thing, is just being able to iterate, to incorporate feedback, whether or not we're in a global pandemic. I think those are essential skills for anyone who's creating something that's truly going to serve the people we attest to serve.
Right. And listening to the needs, I think, as someone also said in the chat. And I think that's like been my practice as a leader, is like listening to, okay, what are my staff saying? Oh, they're saying that the girls need food. Okay, let's listen to that, actually provide that. And then they're coming back with these beautiful stories of the home visitations that they did, delivering the food, and just seeing the joy on the family's faces. It's like, it's interesting. Like, I guess that was the unexpected gift of its attending to the needs of the present moment. So I'm going to get into the Q&A. We have a lot of really great things. Kathy.
Can I just pull something there though? And I think that's so fascinating, because it's not just the food, right? It's the connection. It's the saying, I see you. I see you. And this is a need, and it's in my power to answer and to bear witness to this need. And I think that is, we need that kind of connectedness right now.
Yeah, I would agree. Kathy asks, what are opportunities you see emerging that you weren't necessarily expecting and that you are excited about?
Do I answer that, Nicole? Do you want me
to I think the opportunity for further connection with my team is what I didn't expect, because before we would have probably a monthly scheduled call, especially for me being like out of the countries. It was monthly, but now that it's daily, and then we also have global staff calls weekly, again, that's just reinforcing the importance of human connection and seeing each other, so that we can see our communities better. So I'm excited about that, like building and strengthening communication with my team so that we can also build and strengthen connection with our communities that we serve.
Yeah. And I would say the same thing applies also on a macro level. So Metis really strives to be an ecosystem builder. So often we see that folks are so siloed. Like, if I'm in government, I'm over here, and if I'm in my for-profit company or ed tech, I'm over here. And if I'm running a civil society organization, I'm over here. And folks don't talk and learn. And if we are not collectively learning, I don't think we can have the collective impact we all want to see. So I would say the same is true. Like, there are huge opportunities for collaboration across the sector and for learning across the sector. And I think that crisis can sometimes galvanize that in really positive ways. And so an example I've seen is, the Ministry of Education and the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development has this Kenya Education Cloud, which is a repository of resources that can get pushed out. They also have radio, they also have TV. And this really ensures that, the 15 million Kenyan kids who are out of school now can also access some sort of guidance in their learning. Government has often not been known for, has not had the resources to really build high quality creative content. We've got a lot of ed tech companies that are local or in the surrounding area. Ubongo is based in Tanzania, has incredible content. Kakua, all these edutainment companies have research-backed high quality content. And so we're seeing now partnerships where there used to be it was really hard to get through the bureaucracy to be able to partner. We're seeing opportunities for that emerge. And really just, I would just say for collaboration for impact, I think is a big lesson at a macro level.
Yeah, absolutely. Eric, who's one of your fellows, asks, it certainly is a mark of boldness to step out of the normal to a new territory, the fears, anxieties, etc. I wonder what more made you do this. Making the decision to set up a program in a new country takes a lot. You first.
Oh, for me? Eric, is it for me or for
Both of
Nicole?
us. It's for both of us.
Um, that's so interesting. Like the why for me here. I really just, Eric, I think we talked about this, but I really think if we want kids to have an incredible learning experience, we need adults to also have incredible learning experiences that foster real connection, where they feel seen, where it's relevant and rigorous. We can't expect people to do for young learners what they've never experienced themselves. And so I just saw that was such an issue. I myself as an educator have felt that isolation before. So I think that's where, I think seeing that need, and then again, I think there are times where I was like, well, this is hard, maybe I should give up. It's really hard to birth something. And I think I just learned from our fellows every day what persistence and, love made visible through work looks like. And, I draw great inspiration from that. And I, speaking directly to Eric, who's incredible, does incredible work in STEM education and incredible work for out of school youth nationally, I learn a lot from you.
I feel the same about our survivors in our community. I've recognized that where, like, in speaking to the fear and anxiety that exists in creating something new or going into new territory, I see that with my survivors every single day, where there's fear and anxiety, there's also courage and creativity. And because they have chosen courage over their fear, then why can't I? Emily has a question. Has the North Star in your respective organizations changed due to the new reality emerging? Very good question.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I would say no. I would also say if 2 months ago you said, like, Rebecca, you're going to create content directly for students, I would say no. Like, I work with, and Metis works with leaders, so that students access higher quality education. Like, Metis doesn't have to work directly with students. And, our mission is that really we accelerate the pace at which all kids are going to access an excellent education. And I think in this time of crisis, it became really clear that if other people weren't going to create it, we were going to leverage the relationships between adults and between institutions and organizations to make that happen. So I would say no, the North Star has not changed. The way that we get there has certainly pivoted in ways I didn't imagine in the last month and a half.
Yeah, same. Our North Star has not changed. Our mission is equipping survivors and advocates to lead in ending the cycle of sexual violence. And though it might look different in how we initially planned it, with actual events and going into schools and training students on sexual violence prevention, and going into Sinai and training women in prostitution, other alternatives to work. We're still connecting with them, all the students and all the women in our program, and also all of our scholars in our education program at different levels. And so we're still ending sexual violence in the ways that we can, and actually being even more intentional about ensuring that there is that community and communication in the process. Kathy is asking, how do you both see finding ways to reflect after this is mostly over with your teams, to think about how everyone has grown or what struggles they still have?
I love that. Thanks for prompting that. I don't even think that it occurred to me to think about, on the other side, how will I create a container for the team that I work with, our small team of 4, as well as for the whole community. But I think it's really important. So thanks for raising that question. I'm going to go off and think about that. I think we've thought about it in terms of our work. This is such a a potent moment for reimagination, and everyone in our community is striving for that anyways. And so this is a moment to really step up and make leaps and bounds towards that, with a specific focus for creating for those at the margins. But yeah, I appreciate that question, because that's going to be really important. Like, making meaning of all of this is going to be really important. So thanks for
Yeah,
that, Kath.
yeah, I haven't had time to think about what's happening after this because it's like so many things are happening in the present moment. And so I guess my challenge is, how can I be present to the struggles of today? And so this is where our daily leadership calls of debriefing each day is part of reflecting on the struggles, the challenges, and also the growth and opportunity as a result of that daily challenge. So that's with my team of 3. And then we have a weekly call with our global staff of 22 people. And then the same way, we're given opportunities to reflect and to express some of our challenges, and also some learning lessons. Like, for many of my staff who have never worked at home before, what kind of practices of working at home are working for you? Or what's like a daily routine that can help you focus? So even discussing those things in the present moment and being attentive to that, I think, is what's helping us debrief at a more regular basis, so that when this is all over, the debriefing can still continue, because we're setting up that standard now.
Right. They're practices that we want to take, or you want to take, I think.
And carry that
are
forward.
serving you now and can serve you beyond the pandemic as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, Mary Ann is asking, what are the measures that one can take to re-energize themselves when they feel like they are no longer idealistic or innovative anymore? That's an excellent question. As you know, our background is actually both in photography. Mine is in filmmaking. Creativity, whether it be in like the actual creation of art or in creativity and leadership, does definitely ebb and flow. Rebecca, how would you answer this?
Feel your feels. I would say that's so real, and I would just sit with it. And there's a big ambient heaviness, I think, to being alive in the world right now. And I think to feel the grief, the collective grief of what's happening right now, and the fact that there are people dying and there are people suffering, and there are, here, I was just at a distribution in Haruma and watching teachers distribute the home learning guides. And, we were in a home, and, landlords are taking roofs, okay, because rent's not being paid. And they're taking roofs in the middle. It was pouring rain. So in the middle of the rain, in the middle of a pandemic. So, I mean, like, that doesn't leave me feeling very idealistic, Marianne. And I think that is okay. And it just means that you're paying attention, and you're paying attention to suffering. And I think that is really important, and it's really important not to bypass that. And I think that's something that I've grappled with at different points in my life, and particularly in the last month and a half. But I think to recognize it, to sit with it, and then just to get curious of, like, what is this telling me? It tells me I care. What can I do with these feelings of care or anger or resentment as a result of this suffering, is kind of what I've asked myself. But just also to be gentle with oneself. And that has served me.
Yeah, something that I've been learning myself and encouraging my team to do too is just to listen to your body. Are you tired? Are you hungry? Are you having back pain? Are you having indigestion? Like, are you tense in these areas? Do you have migraines? Like, what is your body telling you? And in recognizing where those pain points are in the body, that sometimes does connect to the emotional pain points that we're feeling too. And that is actually, in my experience, pain is the birth of creativity. But you can't just jump to the creativity part. You actually have to sit there and kind of like dig into that really difficult and ugly place as this,
Dang
as
it.
the whole catalyst.
No, can't be in the pain. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to
Yeah.
be in the pain. As the whole caterpillar to butterfly metaphor, right? And so there's no answer to just like, okay, let's get up and be innovative today. But the wrestling and the sitting in that pain is trusting also that that pain will evolve into a sense of transformation.
You're right. That's so beautiful too, because in this story, as a survivor, and also you working with a community of survivors, they know deeply that there can be a reclamation of a trauma into something that is beautiful.
Right. And
Yeah,
so
there's
how as
I
survivors,
would also, oh, I'm sorry. Go for it.
I was just going to say, how as survivors can we take that learning experience and then even carry it forward for whatever else that we experience in life?
Yeah. I was also going to say that part of the home learning guide is, there's of course literacy and math and social emotional learning and physical and creative activities. But we also, in our latest iteration, are including a Be a Change Maker portion. And so at Metis, again, our fellows go through a design thinking process throughout their fellowship. But we're also including a really kid-friendly version as well, to enact change, again, within their sphere of influence, like we really all can. I believe we're the ones that we're waiting for. Yeah. And so I'll share them here though, because, we're talking about what do you do when you feel despondent, or you don't feel optimistic, or you feel angry. The first step actually that we put for kids is feel. What makes you mad? Pay attention. What makes you upset? What bothers you? What would you like to change? So identify a problem that you want to solve. But it starts with feel. And then there's imagine. Can you imagine lots of different possibilities? Can you come up with lots of different ideas to implement? Then, so it's feel, imagine, then do. Go do it. Plan it, put it into action, believe in yourself, do it. And then share your journey, share your reflection, share what you did, and inspire other people to be change makers as well. So I think that's what we're encouraging kids in this moment to do, and I think it's applicable to leaders of all ages.
Yeah, absolutely. Akinyi is asking a question to you. As important as it is to ensure that we create conducive environments and support continuity in education, what advice do you have for educators and teachers to support kids just being kids?
I love that. I think I saw, and actually, Akinyi is the one who shared this with me, but I think it's so true that particularly, for parents, I actually want to talk a bit about the parent perspective too, of like, in terms of continuity, like, yeah, parents can play a big role in trying to homeschool, but you never have to be a teacher. Like, that's not what even the educators I work with, our teachers, are asking of parents. Because when kids come back to school, like, the teachers are professionals, right? They know how to teach, and they know, like, the whole stereotypes we have against teachers around if you can't do, you teach. That's a whole different cultural conversation we need to be having, because that attitude exists in the United States. It exists here. It exists in many parts of the world. But they are professionals, and they can take care of the teaching and learning bit. But what they can't do, or it's going to be much harder to do, is support a bunch of stressed out, anxious, traumatized kids. And that's, things are awry. It's just how it is. But I think that is the most important thing right now. If you're at home with your child, is just to let them know that they're cared for, keep them safe, enjoy this time with them to the extent that it's possible. I know folks are really juggling a lot of different priorities, but I think that is such an important point, is that kids are still kids right now. And as much as they do want to support the continuity of learning, that continuity is only possible to the extent that we have emotionally receptive, healthy kids. And that's the part that parents know best more than anyone else.
Good word. Juliana is asking, this is a tough one, what is the most satisfying thing in your amazing work?
The most satisfying thing. Oh my gosh, that's such a nice question. Juliana's our accountant. She is a hero. She's a hero. Let's just say that. Like, we need our logo at Metis is a puzzle piece, or is like a puzzle. You're a very important puzzle piece in this whole puzzle. We can't do this work in education without finance people, without anyone listening to this. You're a part of something big, whether or not you think like you are. So, which your question? Okay. The most rewarding, satisfying thing. I think it is learning that, though it feels really hard sometimes, I do believe that the arc of the moral universe does bend towards justice. And to work with so many incredible individuals who are actively working to bend that arc is motivating and inspiring. And when we see moments that we touch justice and equity and excellence in my sphere in education, a bit, that's incredibly rewarding.
Thank you. I think for me, there's so many satisfying things, but one of them is when the survivors in our community recognize the power of their voice and begin to use it, whether that's introducing themselves by name or whether that's in the clothes that they choose to wear or in the stories they choose to tell. It manifests in different ways. So I think that's one of the most satisfying things about my work. Akinya is asking me, beyond providing additional food support, what other essential services is Freely and Hope exploring to support survivors? So in addition to the food, we're offering safe housing for girls that are living in unsafe places. In Zambia, we've actually relocated all of our high school girls to a hostel so that they can all live and study together in a safe place. Since COVID-19, there's been a rise of sexual and domestic violence, but also an increase in gang violence in our community. So they're all living together and getting tutored together. So that's been helpful to also support their academic needs. And they have regular therapy once a week as well at that center. Juliana is another question. With all the competition for money right now for more seemingly pressing needs, including medical, how do you stand out?
Oh my God. I just got a no on a grant today. I don't know. That's the truth. No, it's okay, because I think that it will go and serve someone else who's doing incredible work. And I think that is just the story of it. This is all just one big practice in building resilience. And yeah, so how do we stand out? I think we stand out because our approach is one of collaboration, both at an individual level, but also at a systems level, supporting governments, civil society, and the private sector to collaborate for, in this case, learning continuity, but also, outcomes in education in the long run. I think that we're unique in that we're locally led. All of our fellows are exceptional Kenyan education leaders. And finally, in our response, we've had a focus on those at the margins. And if this crisis teaches us everything, it's that, the health of the most vulnerable impacts the holistic health, right, of the collective. And so we do choose to focus on the most marginalized. So that's why I think I feel proud to do the work that we do, and grateful when it gets funded, and you just keep going when it doesn't.
Yeah, in my experience, actually, generosity has been quite abundant in this season
Mm,
from
yeah.
individuals. Grant makers are
Mm,
another story, but individuals have just been so kind and generous to us during this time. We've had more monthly donors subscribe to give monthly donations more this month and last month than ever before in at one time period, even during our annual galas. Like, so it's
yeah.
really incredible
Yeah.
too, because we haven't actually asked for money. What I've been doing is just telling the story of how we're pivoting and how our community is being responsive to all the needs to ensure that we can holistically look at the health, as you're saying too, the holistic health of our survivors to ensure we're still fighting our mission, pursuing our vision, even though it might look different. So telling that story has been really important. And with that, our community has just been really surrounding us with a lot of love and generosity. So yeah, I'm just really grateful and actually surprised at that, but also seeing how this common, I guess, pain and suffering that we're all going through at different spectrums is actually uniting us all together in ways that I didn't expect. And it's really quite beautiful. And I'm learning a lot in this process. Um, Vivek has a question. While you're both being present to your teams and so many people, providing strength, hope, and appreciation, how do you practice self-care during such uncertain and tough times? We talk about this a lot.
Yeah, great question. Um, I think, okay, so we started this conversation talking about listening to real needs. And I think then comes, so as I try to practice listening to what our community of fellows needs, listening to what our broader education community needs, and pivoting towards that. Um, I'm not always as generous a listener with my own self, but I think the same applies. Just kind of being still and listening to what I also need. And if anyone knows me, I'm not really great at being still. So it's just been a total total work in progress. But for me, that's actually meant I'm doing a ton of baking right now. I am sending my Boda Boda driver, because I want to support him and give him work, to go deliver said baked goods to different people. I am running, and yeah, I think what other people are practicing too, just connecting with people that you care about across the distance, and really finding new ways to reimagine those connections, which has actually been really cool and generative in so many ways. But I think, yeah, the ultimate form of self-care, I think, is just listening to oneself.
Yeah, that's a good word. And Rebecca, you're always challenging me to listen to myself as well. And so in this, I've had to like really listen to myself, because otherwise I'm just feeling really exhausted and I'm more like snappy. And then I'm not making choices or decisions in the most wise way. So I have tried to establish hard breaks. So I have all my work calls in the morning. Right after my work calls are done, I have a hard break for an hour session of yoga. And then I get back to actual work, and try not to take as many calls during that time. And then not every day, but some days I try to take another like cardio break. So your thing is running. I hate running. My thing is Muay Thai. So I do a little bit of that to get some cardio. And then another thing that I feel has been helpful is being present to my family that I live with, and also giving and generous in ways. So acts of service is a way that I show love. So like cleaning or making dinner for other people. So like maybe it's baking for you. Doing that is actually a reciprocal act. And so cooking dinner and sharing dinner with my family is actually something that's really restorative for me. And carving out the time to do so is that's extending that generosity is actually what's giving me life in this time.
Can I say something more than that? I know we're almost at time, but I would say, like, I notice myself, I feel like, wow, there's so many urgent, pressing needs, and we're running webinars, and we're building this resource hub, and I'm onboarding people, by the way, and we're distributing 15,000 guides, And now we're partnering to try to, get them into SMS form and trying to fund it, and like so much all the time. But then I notice if I fall back into that hustle and believe sometimes this lie that sometimes I'm sure we all face, which is I am not enough, I'm not doing enough, then I'm like, man, I'm not learning the lesson this pandemic is here to teach us in the first place, which is to really divorce ourselves from a way of being in the world that I think, is really rooted in a high octane capitalist, patriarchal, all these things, racist, white supremacist way of being in the world. That's what got us here in the first place. And so I think, I'm also trying to be aware of my own thought patterns and be aware of my own work patterns. And I work really hard to, do the work that I feel called to do, it's also, not working. Rest is also resistance. Joy is also resistance. And reeling against the systems that got us here and to this brokenness in ways big and small, I think is super important.
Yeah, I want to get to all these questions, so we might go a little bit over, but understand if people need to drop out for any meetings coming after. But I wanted to just close with how can people get involved with the work that we're doing. So for us at Freely and Hope, definitely follow us on all the social medias at Freely and Hope. And then also, so speaking of grants, we actually did get a grant for COVID-19 relief. So we're launching that initiative on May 11th, and it's actually a double grant. So we're really excited about it, really grateful for it. And all of the funds raised there will support the extra measures that we're expending to ensure that our scholars are kept safe during this time. So look out for that. And that's the best way to get involved.
Double matching?
Double matching.
Okay.
Yeah.
So give people. Okay, great.
And how about for you?
How to get involved. Okay, you can follow our work online at Metis Collective. We're now looking at how do we get this home learning guide out and how do we adapt it to hundreds of thousands of kids. So if you want to be involved in that, if you are a learning designer and want to volunteer time and take a look at our curriculum and support us to make it even stronger, reach out. If you have the ability to sponsor some learning guides, there's the physical ones are 17 cents per guide, and we're going to print and distribute as many as we get funded. And reach out. I trust the creativity of folks as well, and it doesn't have to be just monetary.
Yeah, absolutely. Same with us. If you're in Nairobi, we just started a mentoring program for all of our university girls too. So if you're interested in being part of that, you can reach out. So after this webinar, I'm going to send an email with all these resources, all the links to the campaigns that we're discussing, and maybe some learning resources too for all of you as well. Okay, another question we have is, what would be your top recommendations for resources that educators can access right now to change our educational practices to become more inclusive, accessible, joyful, authentic, and uplifting for our students going forward?
Oh, beautiful. I can send you our resource hub, number one. Number two, I think if you practice those things as an educator, I always think of as a teacher, I was always like, oh yeah, if I can make other people do it, that'll be good. And really it's how do you model that? And how do you model that learning journey? So if you want to make things, I forget the list of things, more fun, more, relevant, if we want to support our kids to be change makers, if we want to support our kids to be critical thinkers, we have to develop those same things in ourselves, and they'll learn. But I can also share a resource hub as well.
Perfect. Marianne's asking, how was the reception when you shared your idea for the first time? That's a hard one. So whenever there are opportunities to share ideas. I'd say the majority of the answer is no, as we know, especially like in asking for grants and trying to get funding for organizations or even funding for or buy-in for ideas. Um,
Mhm.
which helps you to shape the idea to make it even stronger than it was before. And you keep shaping and reshaping and you keep pitching until you get the yeses that you need. So it's just a resilient way of trying again and again.
Yeah, nothing to add there.
Okay. Final question from Melanie. I greatly admire the work that you are both doing. As foreigners living and working in countries that experience increased vulnerability, how have you experienced or witnessed any feelings or forms of saviorism within the context of the pandemic? How can we support and empower local actors who are at the front line of relief provision in their own vulnerable communities?
Oh, such a good question.
Yeah.
Um, this is something that I think I have to check myself on and be committed to undoing in myself, regardless of a pandemic. Um, so I would say that um, the same kind of principles apply. Like, don't assume you know what is right for anyone except yourself, and ask and listen and support the work that has been being done. Metis actually is what the Greeks called deep contextualized knowledge, and so we actually believe that those who are closest to the problem are also closest to the solution. And I think keep practicing that and getting behind those bears of wisdom and leadership is really important now, as it is always.
Yeah, I concur. I think for both of us being in this director role, it gets really tricky, and we want to be very mindful that we're not overstepping our boundaries, not being local. So with that, your question of how can we support and empower local actors who are at the front line, right? That would be, for us, that would be my staff. And for you, that would be your fellows. And so seeing our role really as just that uplifting support system that can allow them to do the work that they need to do, whether it be coaching them through their processes, funding their ideas and their initiatives, and also giving them the power to make decisions that would be best for that specific entity, has been some things that I've been trying to practice more so during this time. And like you said, just listen, really listen, and recognize that there's so much that for myself I don't know because I'm not living there currently, and my experience will be very different. And so if I can recognize that I have a different experience and what they're saying is kind of what's going to guide our way forward, then being responsive to that need would be my responsibility as the director.
And then have relationships of accountability and trust, because you will mess up. And like yeah, we're just saturated, we inhabit a white supremacist world, right? So if we have to be okay knowing that we are situated, or we have to be honest with ourselves that we're situated within that, and we're not above or beyond that, or not susceptible to acting in ways that perpetuate those same power dynamics. So I think having relationships of accountability is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. To close, do you have any final words that you would like to leave our viewers with?
Yeah, I would just say, the topic of this is innovating in a pandemic. And I would just say that we are all innovative. We are all inherently creative. And you do not have to change the world, the whole wide world, but you can change the world that is proximate to you. And I hope that you do. And I hope that you do. One of our fellows mothers was Wangari Maathai, and she said, just do your small thing. And I think that's really important to remember right now. And an antidote to despair, is just committing to do small things with great love, as Mother Teresa said. So yeah, I hope that you learn some things that can encourage you and support you in your own journey to making the world a better place, the world that is proximate to you.
Yes. Thank you so much, Rebecca, for joining us today. All the love and respect to you and the work that you're doing and how you're making the world a better place by empowering other people, not only your fellows, but also a lot of our community members as well. We're just so grateful for the partnership that we have and the friendship that we have. That all started from an Instagram DM. So build more friendships and connections, all of you, during this time, because it might end up into something like this.
Yeah, it could start digital. Yes, yes. Believe that good things can start from unlikely places.
All right.
Thanks so much for having me, Nicole. Keep up the wonderful work of Freeling Hope, and thank you for having me.
All right, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in, and look out in your inboxes for an email from me where I'll be sharing some more resources with you, and continue to do the small things that you can with great love. All right. Bye.
Bye, everyone.